The ballroom inside the Washington Hilton shimmered beneath chandeliers, a glittering sea of gowns, tuxedos, and flashing camera lights. It was one of those nights when the capital's elite gathered, polished smiles masking private agendas, and every word could become tomorrow's headline. The annual American Unity Forum, hosted by the First Lady, had drawn everyone from diplomats to military veterans. Dr. Jill Biden, radiant in a navy gown that mirrored the night sky, moved gracefully through the room, greeting donors, senators, and journalists. Her staff had ensured that the event flowed smoothly, at least, until her aide leaned in, whispering something that made her pause. "Kash Patel just arrived, ma'am." Her smile stiffened for a fraction of a second. Kash Patel, the former Pentagon official, a staunch ally of Trump, and one of the most outspoken critics of the current administration. His very presence at a White House-sponsored event was bound to stir attention. But Jill was no stranger to controversy. She decided she would handle it with poise. Moments later, Kash entered, dressed sharply in a tailored gray suit. His expression was calm but alert, scanning the room as murmurs followed him like ripples in water. Some guests nodded politely, others turned away. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. He had come by invitation, officially from the event's veterans panel, but he suspected more than a few people wished he hadn't. Jill, ever the hostess, approached him with a diplomatic smile. "Mr. Patel," she greeted, "I'm surprised to see you tonight." Kash matched her tone, "I go where unity is promised, drive." Biden. That earned a few polite chuckles from nearby guests, though the First Lady's eyes didn't waver. "Well, I hope we can all keep tonight civil," she said sweetly. "After all, we're here for America, not politics." "Of course," Kash replied. "Though sometimes it's hard to tell the difference anymore." A photographer's flash went off, capturing their exchange mid-smile, though everyone nearby could feel the chill. Later in the evening, as guests took their seats for dinner, Jill took the stage to give her keynote speech. Her remarks began as expected, about unity, education, and healing after years of division. But as she turned toward the topic of misinformation, her tone sharpened. "Too often," she said, her voice echoing across the ballroom, "we've seen former officials spread lies that endanger our democracy, distortions meant to divide us further, to feed outrage for profit." She paused deliberately, her gaze sweeping the audience. It lingered for just a moment too long on Kash Patel. Cameras followed her line of sight. The implication was unmistakable. Several guests glanced at him, some even smirked. The humiliation was subtle, but deliberate. Jill smiled warmly as if she hadn't just thrown a political dart. "But tonight," she continued, "we celebrate truth, integrity, and the courage to lead with compassion." Polite applause followed. But at Kash's table, forks barely moved. His phone buzzed, already lighting up with messages. "She called you out on national TV. You gonna respond?" He didn't move at first. He simply stared at the stage, his expression unreadable. After dinner, as the crowd dispersed for drinks and mingling, he found himself cornered by reporters eager for a reaction. "Mr. Patel, care to comment on the First Lady's remarks?" He simply smiled. "Not yet," he said, walking past them toward the exit. But, "not yet," didn't mean, never. The next morning, the clip of Jill Biden's speech dominated social media. The moment where she looked toward Patel was replayed, analyzed, debated. Some hailed it as a powerful statement against disinformation. Others called it an unnecessary personal attack. Cable networks ran it on loop. Hashtags like #JillVsCash trended within hours. By noon, Kash Patel was on the set of The Glenn Carter Show, one of the nation's top-rated political talk programs. Dressed in his signature confidence, he waited patiently as the host introduced him. "Last night, the First Lady appeared to take aim at you, directly," Carter began. "You were there in person. What was going through your mind when that happened?" Kash leaned forward slightly. "Glenn," he said calmly, "when someone talks about unity but uses their platform to shame others, that's not leadership, that's theater." The audience murmured in agreement. He continued, "You see, I went to that event hoping we could actually talk about what unity means, for veterans, for teachers, for families. But instead, what I witnessed was a lecture. A stage performance for applause." Carter nodded. "You're saying she tried to humiliate you?" "Oh, she did more than try," Kash replied with a wry grin. She turned an event about national unity into a partisan spectacle. But here's the thing, when people use their power to silence others, it usually backfires. That line caught fire across the internet. Within hours, clips of the interview spread like wildfire. Supporters praised his composure, calling it a masterclass in dignity under fire. Even some moderates began questioning why the First Lady had singled him out. By the end of the day, the narrative had flipped. What began as a jab from the stage had transformed into a national conversation about free speech, partisanship, and the optics of power. Inside the White House, Jill's communications team scrambled. "We didn't name him directly," one advisor insisted during a staff meeting. "We never mentioned Kash Patel." But Jill wasn't satisfied. "It's the implication that matters," she said, pacing. "He's using this to play the victim." Her chief of staff sighed. "And it's working." 2 days later, Kash was invited to speak at a Veterans Leadership Summit in Virginia. The hall was packed, reporters, veterans, and ordinary citizens eager to hear him. He began his speech without notes. "When I served this country," he said, "I didn't do it for a party or a president. I did it for the idea that every American, no matter who they voted for, deserves respect." Applause erupted. "Now, lately," he continued, "some people have forgotten that respect. They think disagreement means disrespect. They think silence equals peace. But real unity isn't built by pretending we all agree, it's built by listening, even when we don't." His words resonated far beyond the room. Overnight, clips of the speech went viral. News outlets called it an unexpected call for civility from one of Washington's most polarizing figures. Behind closed doors, even some of Jill's staff admitted it was a powerful message. "He's not attacking her," one aide said. "He's turning the whole thing into a moment of reconciliation. That's smart." Meanwhile, Jill faced mounting pressure. During a televised Q&A event a week later, a journalist asked her directly, "Do you regret your remarks at the Unity Forum, given how they've been perceived?" She took a deep breath. "I think it's important that we hold people accountable for spreading falsehoods," she said carefully. "But if my words made anyone feel personally attacked, that was never my intention." It was a diplomatic answer, but the headlines the next morning were merciless. First Lady backtracks after Patel controversy. Still, Jill wasn't done. That same night, she requested a private meeting with Kash. Her team opposed it, but she insisted. "If he truly believes in unity," she said, "let's see if he's willing to talk face to face." The meeting took place in a quiet conference room at a Washington nonprofit center. No cameras, no reporters. Just the two of them and a pot of black coffee between them. "I didn't expect you to agree to this," Jill said, offering a faint smile. "I didn't expect you to ask," Kash replied. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jill broke the silence. "You know, when I mentioned lies that divide, I wasn't trying to attack you personally." Kash nodded slowly. "I know what you meant. But when you hold the microphone, the impact isn't always what you intend. People hear what they're looking for, not always what you say." That caught her off guard. "So, you're saying it's my fault people misinterpreted it?" He shook his head. "No, I'm saying maybe we both got caught in the same trap, politics over people." That line lingered. Jill looked at him for a long moment before exhaling. "Maybe we did." What began as a tense meeting turned into a surprisingly candid conversation. They talked about veterans' mental health programs, about misinformation online, and even about how the media thrives on division. When the meeting ended, Jill extended her hand. "Thank you for coming," she said genuinely. "Despite everything, I appreciate this." Kash shook her hand. "Me too. Maybe next time, we talk before the cameras roll." A faint smile curved her lips. "Deal." A few days later, a joint press release went out, brief, understated, but powerful. Greater than drive. Jill Biden and former official Kash Patel met privately this week to discuss bipartisan efforts supporting American veterans and promoting civil dialogue. Both agreed that unity requires courage, conversation, and compassion. It wasn't flashy, but it sent shockwaves through Washington. Commentators were stunned. In a rare move, one anchor reported, two political rivals have set aside differences for a common cause. For once, both their supporters applauded. Donations to veterans' charities surged in the days that followed. The media, hungry for controversy, found themselves covering a story about cooperation instead of conflict. And in the quiet that followed, both Jill and Kash seemed changed by it, not friends, perhaps, but no longer enemies. Weeks later, at another event, Jill was asked about the experience. She smiled softly before answering. "I learned something important," she said. "Sometimes, the person you think is your opponent might just be the one reminding you what leadership really means." Across town, when reporters asked Kash the same question, he chuckled. "What happened next?" he said, echoing the viral headline that started it all. "What happened next is, we actually talked. And maybe, that's the part nobody expected. The feud that began with humiliation ended with something rarer, humility. And in Washington, that might have been the most unbelievable thing of all."